Okay, I hope I'm audible to all students who are attending this lecture of intermediate macroeconomics. We intend to start with a new topic within the intermediate macroeconomics course. This is called the open economy model. It is one of the most important topics in the macroeconomics course, and the lectures we do on this particular topic. So we will be looking at what happens when the economy opens up for trade with the rest of the world. So we will be looking at the currencies of different economies. We will be looking at how an economy interacts with the rest of the world. We will look at the concept of balance of payments, exchange rates. So all that is going to come within our lectures on the open economy models. Now, the book I prefer to follow for my lectures on open economic models, this is Dornbusch and Fisher. This is the book I prefer to follow, Dornbusch and Fisher, for my lectures on open economy models. Okay, and in this particular lecture, we will be focusing on the concept of balance of payments and exchange rates. Balance of payments and the concept of exchange rates. Now, students will find this in chapter 6 of Dornbusch and Fisher, DBS. Okay, so let's talk about balance of payments and then we'll go on to exchange rates. So all students know from my introductory macroeconomics course that what does balance of payment mean? So balance of payment, short form is BOP, is a record of, it is a record of the transactions of the residents of a country, transactions of the residents of a country with the rest of the world. Okay, so when we talk about balance of payments, it is like any other account which is based on double entry bookkeeping and accountancy. Balance of payment is also an account which captures all transactions pertaining to the residents of a country with the rest of the world. Okay, now students need to understand that there is a difference between residency and citizenship. You are a resident of a country if your economic interest lies in that particular country. You may or may not be a citizen of that country. So students should be clear with the concept of citizenship and residency. You are a citizen of a country where you are born, but you become the resident of that country where your economic interest lies in. Okay, so when we talk about balance of payments, it will be keeping a record of all transactions of the residents of a country. Now, residents of one particular country may or may not be the citizens of that country. Okay, so BOP is going to keep a track of transactions of the residents of a country with the rest of the world. Now, let's look at the components of balance of payments. So, components of the balance of payments. So the first component we have, or the first account we have, is called the current account. We have done this in our introductory macroeconomics course. It's going to be a revision in this lecture. Okay, so current account records transactions relating to It records transactions relating to the trade in goods and services. Trade in goods. Goods are visible and tangible, as well as services which are not visible and intangible. Okay, so it records transactions relating to the trades in goods and services as well as transfer payments. Now students know the concept of transfer payments from the introductory macroeconomics course. Okay, so transfer payments are unilateral payments which are made either by the residents of a country to the rest of the world, or payments received by the residents of the country from the rest of the world. Okay, no good or service is produced in this case. It's merely a transfer payment. Okay, so let's talk about goods. Goods, all of us know, goods include all the physical commodities. Okay, we talk about services. So what do services include? So we can say that services include freight charges. Services include freight charges, royalty payments, interest payments. Okay, so all these come within the services. At the same time, we can say that services also include the net investment income. Net investment income means income earned from the investment abroad by the residents of a country minus income earned by the foreigners in our country. So net investment income captures income earned by the domestic residents abroad minus the income earned by the investments made by the foreigners in our country. Okay, so then we can move on. Another component within services would be interest and profit. Interest and profit on assets. Interest and profits on assets abroad. So these assets are nothing but the home assets basically. So interest and profits earned on assets abroad minus income earned by the foreigners. Income earned by the foreigners on assets owned by them, on the assets owned by them in the home country. So services includes all this. Okay, services include the freight charges. Okay, basically freight charges means the transportation charges. When goods are getting transported from one economy to the other economy, okay, there are freight charges to be paid, shipping charges, you can think of it like that, royalty payments. Okay, there are certain books which are sold by the foreign authors in our economy, and there are certain books which are exported or sold by our authors in the foreign economy, so there are royalty payments on that. Okay, then we have interest payments. There are certain bonds, foreign bonds owned by the domestic residents, and there are certain domestic bonds which are owned by the foreigners. So the interest payments on that, okay, buying and receiving of interest payments. Then we also have net investment income, which simply captures the income earned from investments made by the domestic residents abroad minus the income earned by the foreigners who have made investment in our economy. Then we have interest and profits on assets owned by the residents abroad minus the income which the foreigners receive on the assets which they own in our economy. So all this is a part of the current account. And then guys, we can write a line on transfer payments as well. So transfer payments are unilateral payments. Transfer payments are unilateral payments which consist of remittances, gifts and grants. So I can write it here, gifts and grants. So basically, guys, those payments which are not leading to production of any good or service are transfer payments. You receive gifts from your relatives living abroad. You receive grants abroad. Okay. You receive remittances from abroad. All of these are transfer payments. Okay. So when transfer payments are made, they are not leading to creation of any good or service. And they are unilateral payments. That means they are one-sided. So if you are receiving a grant from abroad, you don't need to pay back. Unlike the loan, if an economy is receiving a loan from, say, the World Bank, that loan has to be repaid. So it's bilateral. But if you are receiving a grant or you are receiving remittances or gifts from your relatives abroad, you don't need to pay them back necessarily. So it's a unilateral or one-sided payment. So all these are a part of current account. So if I sum up, current account basically includes transactions relating to goods, relating to services, and relating to the transfer payments. So three things come within the current account: goods, services, and transfer payments. Now, let us see when will the current account be in surplus and when will the current account be in deficit. Okay, so let's understand this rule, very simple rule. Any transaction relating to goods, services, or transfer payments that results in the inflow of foreign exchange, that results in an inflow of foreign exchange into the economy is added on the credit side of the current account. Is added on the credit side of the current account. And we can say any transaction relating to goods, services, or the transfer payments, any transaction relating to goods, services, or transfer payments that results in the outflow of foreign exchange, that results in an outflow of foreign exchange is added on the debit side of the current account. So if we understand this rule, then we would be easily able to assess whether any transaction would lead to a surplus or a deficit in the current account. So very simple, if we go by this rule, any transaction which is causing the foreign exchange to come into our country will be added on the credit side of the current account and will lead to a surplus. On the other hand, any transaction which causes the foreign exchange to flow out of our country will be added on the debit side of the current account and will be treated as deficit. So I can say that using this rule, we can say that the current account will be in surplus. The current account will be in surplus if the exports of the domestic economy are more than its imports plus the net transfer made to the foreigners. Now, guys, if we go by this rule, clearly all of us know that when we are exporting to the rest of the world, foreign exchange is coming into our country because payments will be made by the foreigners in lieu of what we are exporting to them. And when we are importing from rest of the world, we have to make payment to the foreigners in lieu of imports. That means foreign exchange will flow out of our country. And when we are making the transfer payment to foreigners. So net transfer to foreigner means what? Net transfer to foreigner means transfer payment to foreigners, transfer payment made to the foreigners, minus the transfer payment received from the foreigners. So when we talk about net transfer to foreigners, it's the transfer payments made to the foreigners minus the transfer payments received from the foreigners. So exports are causing an inflow of foreign exchange. Exports are causing an inflow of, I can say, forex. Forex is the short form we use for foreign exchange. So exports are causing an inflow of forex, and imports plus net transfer to foreigners, this is causing outflow of forex. So when the inflow of foreign exchange exceeds the outflow of foreign exchange for a given economy, we say that that particular economy is running a surplus in its current account. So hoping that students have understood this and have no doubts. And likewise, we can say the reverse. We can say that the current account will be in deficit if the reverse happens. Current account will be in deficit if the exports are less than the imports plus the net transfer to foreigners. That means if the inflow of foreign exchange into our economy is less than the outflow of foreign exchange from our economy, we say that the current account is running a deficit. So hoping that students have understood the current account, the rule relating to how transactions are recorded in the current account, and when is the current account said to be in surplus or deficit. Okay, and we can say when will the current account will be in balance. So I can say that the current account will be in balance, or I can say equilibrium. The better word to use here is balance. The current account will be in balance if the exports exactly equal the imports plus the net transfer to foreigners. So this would be an equilibrium situation or a stable situation where the inflow of forex into the economy exactly equals the outflow of forex from the economy. But no economy in the world is having the current account in balance. Either economies are running a surplus or they are running a deficit with respect to the other economies. Okay, so now let's move forward. Let's now talk about the capital account. So within the balance of payments, the second account we have is the capital account. Now what does capital account capture? So capital account records purchase and sale of physical and financial assets. It records the purchase and sale of physical and financial assets such as stocks, bonds, and land. So when we talk about capital account, it purely contains transactions pertaining to the sale and purchase of physical and financial assets. Okay, now when will the capital account be in surplus and when will the capital account be in deficit? So before moving on to that, examples of transactions would be FDI. So when we talk about foreign direct investment, so foreign direct investment, which refers to the investment made by the parent company in the domestic economy. Okay, so if there is a foreign company which is based abroad, which is buying physical assets in our economy, okay, and is opening up factories or stores in our economy, that clearly is nothing but foreign direct investment. FDI is always for a long term, so it's a long term investment. So FDI refers to the long term investment made in physical assets by the foreign companies in the domestic economy. Another example of transactions pertaining to capital account would be foreign institutional investment. Foreign institutional investment. Now this is called as FII. Now FII captures the transactions in which the foreigners are buying stock or bonds in the domestic economy. So if the foreigners are investing in the stock market of the domestic economy, they are buying the shares in the domestic economy. Okay, so that is called as the foreign institutional investment. Now foreign institutional investment is more liquid and short term. It is a more liquid investment and it is usually for short term. So basically foreign institutional investment will capture the investment made by the foreigners in the financial assets of the domestic economy. Whereas foreign direct investment captures the investments made by the foreigners in the physical assets of the domestic economy. So I can say that FDI is less liquid and for long term. FDI is less liquid and for long term. Whereas FII is a more liquid investment and for short term. Okay, so moving forward, let's now talk about the capital account deficit and capital account surplus. So again, we have the same rule which we were doing in the current account. The rule remains the same, but how we use it in the capital account changes. So any transaction relating to physical or financial assets, any transaction relating to physical or financial assets that results in the inflow of foreign exchange, that results in an inflow of foreign exchange into the economy, is added on the credit side of the capital account, is added on the credit side of the capital account, and any transaction relating to physical or financial assets, any transaction relating to the physical or financial assets that results in the outflow of foreign exchange, is added on the debit side of the capital account. So this rule makes the transactions pertaining to capital accounts very much clear. Any transaction relating to assets, physical or financial, which is causing the foreign exchange to flow into the economy, is added on the credit side of the capital account, and any transaction relating to physical or financial assets which results in an outflow of foreign exchange is added on the debit side of the capital account. So let's see, guys, when will the capital account be in surplus? So I can write that the capital account is in surplus when there is a net capital inflow into the economy. When there is a net capital inflow into the economy. I can further explain it, and I can say that is when the receipts from the sale of physical or financial assets, when the receipts from the sale of physical and financial assets abroad exceeds our payment for the purchase of physical or financial assets abroad. So if we read this sentence carefully, it is self-explanatory. Capital account is said to be in surplus when there is a net capital inflow into the economy. Now, what does that mean? That means the payment which we have received from the sale of physical or financial assets abroad is exceeding the payments we have to make to the foreigners for buying physical or financial assets from them. That means when the payments we receive for assets exceed the payments we have to make for those assets, it means there is a net capital inflow into the economy. So we say that the capital account is in surplus. On the other hand, we can say that the capital account is in deficit. Capital account is in deficit when there is a net capital outflow. When there is a net capital outflow from the economy, and we can further explain it by saying that is when the receipts from the sale of physical or financial assets, when the receipts from the sale of physical or financial assets abroad is less than our payment for the purchase of physical or financial assets abroad. So guys, what does this mean? This means that when the payments we are receiving from selling our assets abroad is less than the payments we have to make to the foreigners for buying physical or financial assets from them, in that case, we say that our economy's capital account is running a deficit. So hoping that students have understood when the capital account is said to be in surplus and when the capital account is said to be in deficit, and when will the capital account be in balance. Now I'm not writing it, but I can discuss it orally. Capital account will be in balance if the receipts from the sale of physical or financial assets abroad is exactly equal to the payments we are making to the foreigners for buying physical or financial assets from them. That means capital account will be in balance when my capital inflow is exactly equal to capital outflow. Okay, so now let's move forward and now let's talk about when will the balance of payment be in equilibrium. So now our heading is balance of payment equilibrium. So now we talk about balance of payment equilibrium. So let us see when will the balance of payments be in equilibrium. So guys, let's talk about a situation when there is a deficit in the current account. So I can say that if a country runs a deficit, in its current account, what does that mean, guys? If an economy is running a deficit in the current account, it means the payments which we have to make to the foreigners for goods and services is more than the payments which the foreigners have to make to us for those goods and services. So that means if a country runs a deficit in its current account, spending more abroad than it receives from sales to the rest of the world. ROW means the rest of the world. This deficit will be financed. How will we finance this deficit? This deficit will be financed by either selling assets abroad, or by borrowing from abroad. That means what, guys? That means if an economy is running a deficit in its current account, how will that economy finance the deficit? Deficit means a shortfall. That means in net terms, we have to make the payment to the foreigners for goods and services. Now, since in net terms, we have to make payment to the foreigners for goods and services, how will we arrange that payment? Either we will sell our assets abroad and use the money to finance the deficit, or we will borrow from abroad to finance the deficit in the current account. Now, when we are selling assets abroad or when we are borrowing from abroad, foreign exchange is coming into our country, which means net capital inflow. So I can say that my current account deficit will exactly be balanced by net capital inflow such that their sum will exactly be equal to 0. So I hope that students have understood this equation. So this equation is telling us what? This equation is simply telling us that if an economy is running a deficit in its current account, this deficit will be financed either by selling domestic assets abroad or by borrowing from abroad. And both these options are causing foreign exchange to flow into our country. When we are selling assets abroad, then also foreign exchange is coming into our country. When we are borrowing from abroad, then also foreign exchange is coming into our country. Now, since foreign exchange is coming into our country via both these transactions, we say that there is a net capital inflow. So the current account deficit will exactly be balanced by the net capital inflow, making the sum of these terms equal to 0. So we will say that the economy will achieve a balance of payments equilibrium. So hoping that students have understood this and have no doubt. Okay, so now if I talk more about the capital account, okay, if I talk more about the capital account, so I can say that capital account can be split into two parts. We can further split the capital account into two parts. First part is the transactions relating to the country's private sector. Transactions relating to the country's private sector. And the second type of transactions within the capital account are the official reserve transactions. Official reserve transactions relating to the central bank activities. So those transactions which are corresponding to buying and selling of assets by the private sector of the economy, and those transactions which are relating to buying and selling of foreign exchange by the central bank are a part of the official reserve transactions. So official reserve transactions relate to those transactions pertaining to buying and selling of foreign exchange by the central bank of the economy. So I can write one more line, that official reserve transactions which come within the capital account only. Official reserve transactions include those transactions relating to the buying or selling of foreign exchange, by the central bank of the economy. So when the central bank intervenes by buying foreign exchange or by selling foreign exchange in the world market, such transactions are under the official reserve transactions. So capital account consists of two types of transactions made by the country's private sector pertaining to buying or selling of physical or financial assets. Official reserve transactions relating to the central bank's buying or selling of foreign exchange. Okay, so if I now talk about the current account deficit, so now I can say that if an economy, so this is a note, if an economy is running a current account deficit, CAD stands for current account deficit, it can be financed in two ways. This current account deficit can be financed in two ways. First way is that a current account deficit can be financed by the private sector residents. It can be financed by the private sector residents selling of assets abroad, selling of assets abroad, or borrowing from abroad. So one way to finance a current account deficit is that the private sector can either sell its assets abroad or can borrow from abroad. Both these cases are causing a net capital inflow into the economy, which will be used to finance the current account deficit. And another method is that a current account deficit can also be financed. It can also be financed by the government, which runs down its foreign exchange, or I can simply say forex, selling foreign currency, or I can say thereby selling the foreign currency in the foreign market. Thereby selling the foreign currency in the forex market. So these transactions fall under the official reserve transactions. So current account deficit can also be financed when the government, or for that matter, the central bank, runs down its foreign exchange reserve. Runs down the forex means the central bank starts selling its foreign exchange in the forex market. Students should remember that the central bank of every economy has foreign exchange reserves of other countries. So if I talk about our economy also contains reserves of foreign currencies like dollar, like yen, like pounds, euros, and so on. The central bank of every economy also holds reserves of foreign currencies. So when that economy is running a current account deficit, the central bank of that economy can sell its foreign exchange reserves into the foreign exchange market. That is what is meant by running down its forex. So what we have learned is, if I quickly revise with all students, when we talk about capital account, it consists of two types of transactions. Transactions relating to buying or selling of physical or financial assets by the country's private sector. The second type of transactions are the official reserve transactions, which are purely carried out by the central bank and pertain to buying or selling of foreign exchange reserves by the central bank in the foreign exchange market. Now, if the economy runs a current account deficit, you can finance that deficit by two ways. Either the private sector residents can sell their assets abroad or borrow from abroad. Both these cases cause a net capital inflow into the economy, which can be used to finance the current account deficit. Or another way is that the current account deficit can also be financed when the government or the central bank runs down its foreign exchange reserves by selling the foreign currency in the foreign exchange market. This will fall under the category of the official reserve transactions. Okay, and similarly, we can write a note. We have discussed about the current account deficit, but what happens if there is a surplus? What happens if there is a surplus? So I can say, let's write this note. If the economy runs a current account surplus, CAS, then the private sector can use this surplus. Private sector can use this surplus either either to pay off its debt, or to buy assets abroad. This means what, guys? If you can see, when the private sector is repaying its debt or buying assets abroad, both these transactions are causing what? Both these transactions are causing capital outflow. When the private sector is buying assets abroad or when the private sector is repaying its debt, both these transactions cause the foreign exchange to move out of the economy. So I can say that current account surplus plus net capital outflow should also be exactly equal to 0. That means if there is a current account surplus, it will be exactly balanced by the net capital outflow so that the balance of payment is in equilibrium. Okay, so we forgot to mention about the central bank. So let's mention about the central bank also. So if the economy runs a current account surplus, then the private sector can use this surplus either to pay off its debts or to buy assets abroad, or the central bank can use this surplus. The central bank can use this surplus to buy foreign exchange, forex, in the foreign exchange market. Okay? Which causes the forex reserves of the central bank to rise. So what we have learned is that when the economy is running a current account surplus means the payments which we are receiving from the foreigners for goods and services is more than the payments we have to make to the foreigners for goods and services. That means, guys, in net terms, the foreigners are paying us. And in net terms, when the foreigners are paying us, we are using this surplus either to pay off our debts or buy assets abroad, or the central bank can use this surplus to buy foreign exchange in the foreign exchange market, which causes the foreign exchange reserves of the central bank to rise. Again, this transaction comes under official reserve transactions. So this is a part of the official reserve transactions. So guys, what we have learned is, if I quickly sum up till now regarding the balance of payments, we have simply learned that when the economy runs a current account deficit, it will be financed by net capital inflow such that their sum is 0. When the economy is running a current account surplus, in equilibrium, the current account surplus will be balanced by net capital outflow such that their sum is 0. So this is the case of BOP equilibrium. Balance of payments of any economy will be in equilibrium if the current account deficit is exactly balanced by net capital inflow and the current account surplus is balanced by net capital outflow. So this is the desired situation. I am not saying that this will actually happen. What we are learning is balance of payments will be in equilibrium only when the current account deficit is balanced by net capital inflow or the current account surplus is balanced by net capital outflow. In that case, balance of payment is in equilibrium. But when is the balance of payment in surplus? So I can say that BOP surplus will exactly be equal to current account surplus. So balance of payments will be in surplus when the current account is also in surplus, and then my capital account is also in surplus, so net capital inflow. So I can say that my balance of payments is in surplus if my current account is also in surplus and capital account is also in surplus. That means net capital inflow. And when do I say that my balance of payment is in deficit? My balance of payment is in deficit if my current account is also in deficit and my capital account is also in deficit. That means net capital outflow. So students should be able to understand that balance of payment equilibrium is a desired situation. But if I talk about BOP surplus, balance of payments of an economy is in surplus when both the current and the capital account are in surplus. And balance of payment of any economy is said to be in deficit if both the current and the capital accounts are running deficit. However, if the deficit of the current account gets balanced by the surplus in the capital account, or surplus in the capital account is balanced by the deficit in the surplus in the current account is balanced by the deficit in the capital account, we say that the balance of payment is in equilibrium. So hoping that students are clear with this. And guys, this is where I intend to stop in this particular lecture. The objective was to cover with all students all concepts regarding the balance of payment. Now in the next lecture of open economy model, we shall discuss about the concept of exchange rates. Okay, so this is where I intend to stop. Any doubts, students can unmute their mics and ask, or you can call up, or you can mail me your doubts at the following email ID. You can mail me your doubts at the following email ID. Okay, so this is where I intend to stop in this particular lecture. Many more lectures on open economy models to come. Okay, so this is where I